So, seems like people want me to talk Star Wars lore.
Well, today's the day.
So for my first video then, I'll be talking about the Carrack-Class Light Cruiser. This ship first came into the lore from the West End Games RPG, and later saw use in the EU novels Heir to the Empire in 1991, and the Truce at Bakura in 1993. It's a ship largely overlooked by the fandom, about as much as its successor, the Lancer-class frigate. Granted, there isn't much good Star Wars for it to be in these days, so we'll make do talking about what it used to be in. And for that, we're going to be doing a lot of hopping around in the lore to paint a full picture of this ship and its capabilities. The Carrack is an early Imperial ship, having seen service during the Clone Wars, and by the time of the OT is an old but reliable veteran, alongside other ships such as the Victory-class Star Destroyer and the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser. The Carrack was first mentioned on the Star Wars Rules Companion in January 1989 as one of various Imperial ships. It was fully detailed and revealed in the Imperial Sourcebook First Edition in October of '89, same year. The ship would continue on in lore to be a seldom mentioned but nonetheless important ship in the roster of the Empire, serving as one of its many instruments of maintaining order in far-flung systems.
Ship is smart and quick, Mr. Warren.
Thank you, sir.
Coming in at 350 meters long, or for us Americans, roughly 1,148 feet long, she's just shy of the height of the Empire State Building in length. Other than that, she is 72 meters wide by 75 in depth. I'm just taking books, unsighted numbers on faith here. Please don't cook me for not doing the math on this. I can. I'm just saving my autism for later.
To quote Shakespeare freely, the Ides of December are come. Aye, Caesar, but not God.
So the Carrack depicted here from the Imperial Sourcebook is your baseline Carrack. This is the most common model in service during the events of the films, and is all in all a solid ship. Equipped with 10 heavy turbo lasers, 20 laser cannons, and 5 tractor beam projectors, it's a match for your average hero ship, be it a light freighter or snub fighter. Looking at the RPG stats, its hull strength is greater than that of the Victory Star Destroyer, and about on par with the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser, two ships that were put into service around the same period. It's got a full crew complement of 1,234, with 1,007 crewmen and officers, 85 gunners, and 142 troopers typically aboard. Given its size, it's not likely to be carrying stormtroopers, but instead the often overlooked Imperial Navy troopers. These guys would handle your typical onboard security, as well as taking part in boarding actions or coming along with an officer during more personal customs inspection. Its shield network is pretty good by Imperial standards, and according to the West End Game stats, they are slightly more powerful than a Dreadnought's, but less than a Victory Star Destroyers. It has a cargo capacity of 3,500 metric tons. Now, I picked the brain of somebody who used to work in military logistics, and we spent a while talking about this, and he admits while the math may not be entirely correct because he used to work with infantry and not aboard a ship, we think this is pretty close. So, in regards to foodstuffs, what we agreed on is the average crewman eats about 2 kilograms of food per day as an average. In combat conditions, he said it's probably more likely to go up to 3 or 5, but for the sake of a daily average, we went with the 2K. An Imperial Navy ship isn't likely to see more action than an active infantry unit, and will likely spend most of its time on quiet patrol duties. Using the Star Wars calendar for a year of 368 days, and converting kilograms to metric tons for a fully loaded Carrack of 1,234 men, you get this formula. Food times crew times year equals the amount of goods in kilograms for a year of foodstuffs. Then convert that into metric tons, and the resulting cargo space taken up by foodstuffs is 908,224 kilograms, or 908 metric tons. Generously rounding that up, that's not even a full third of a Carrack's cargo capacity. If we went to a full 1,000 tons just to give additional food stores, that still leaves a lot of cargo space aboard a Carrack. 2,500 tons is the amount of water in an Olympic swimming pool. In reality, most of that space is going to be taken up for things like equipment storage and spare parts. Even with the long deployment times these ships are going to be out for, they aren't droid crewed, and they're going to end up over a planet every few weeks.
Starfleet could have sent a probe out here to make maps and take pictures, but they didn't. They sent us, so that we could explore with our own senses.
A lot of resource recycling is going to be done as well aboard that ship, at least in terms of water usage and filtration. probably getting its tanks topped off whenever it's in port, same for foodstuffs. Now for the longest time I didn't pay this ship much mind. I knew about it. I didn't really appreciate the simple role it had until I started diving into the West End Games lore. But one of the things that really got me hooked on the Carrack was this old war movie, The Battle of the River Plate. Based on the battle of the same name from World War II, a group of 3 British light cruisers are patrolling the southern Atlantic, hunting for the German pocket battleship Admiral Graf Spee. If you haven't seen it, give it a watch after you're finished with this. Trust me, it's a good movie.
You did order toast, didn't you, madam?
And I bring this up just to kind of compare it with the Carrack. So let's start looking at the ship in question. The biggest, literally, is the bridge viewport. It's so big you could fly a TIE fighter through it. In this panel here, you can kind of see how similar it is to these British light cruisers.
Make to Achilles and Exeter. I would like to see you 1100 today on board flagship.
So in this case, this is canonically what the bridge of a Carrack looks like. Well, it's not the same design style as the command walkways on Quat ships. It still has the crew pits and the tier design that harkens back to the classic Star Destroyer bridge. There's also something to be said about a ship whose bridge viewport spans entire decks. Granted, in Star Wars' case, it's all transparent steel, and that's about as good as a ship's hull. Some people might think differently, which we'll get to. In regards to the hull, the Carrack has both great strength and a crippling weakness. To the former, I'm of course talking about one of the many unique features apart from the deck-spanning viewport, its bulkhead compartments. With crew being found alive and well in these ships after battles that would have fully destroyed similar vessels. So each compartment aboard is a survival shelter.
All hands, this is the captain.
This catwalk is going to be our home for a while, a week, maybe more. You may not be comfortable, but you'll be alive. We have the best crew in the fleet and the sturdiest ship. I promise you, we'll get through this.
Compare that to your average Disney canon Imperial Star Destroyer, and you're looking at a long and successful career in one of these by contrast. Now, about that whole crippling weakness thing I mentioned earlier. Now clearly, someone looked at the Carrack and thought, that's too good. Let's give it a Death Star video game weakness. And we got that from the True Set Bakura novel, unfortunately. This factoid ends up touched upon in the Guide to Vehicles and Vessels as well. This seems kinda nonsensical, but something similar does exist for the Strike-Class cruiser. Though for the Strike cruiser, this comes down to the vessel having a new modular construction concept, while the Carrack has its main generators getting knocked out, which is not ideal in a combat scenario.
Did you hear that? They shut down the main reactor. We'll be destroyed for sure. This is madness.
Now, some might point to the viewport and say, that kinda looks like a weakness to me. And to them I say, just like with the Executor, it's not an issue if your shields are still up.
Toilet!
For the Strike Cruiser, the whole individual segments getting knocked out seems a little more reasonable to me. But on the whole, this weakness is kind of irrelevant. Even Han treats it as a long shot here, and even in the book they don't go through with it due to circumstances. But luckily this whole problem gets kinda semi-retconned out here in Fact File 106. Otherwise, every single Star Wars ship might as well be rocking a solid hull and flying everything by computers. And if you look into it, you'll see that transparasteel is just about as resilient as a ship's hull, and even to small arms fire. Another fun fact to think on is, just like in real life, there's probably different grades of transparasteel, from civilian to military grade, tinting and non-tinting. TIE fighter cockpits do this to help shield pilots from bright flashes, and viewports on the bridge automatically do this as well. They also help reduce glare from traveling in hyperspace, and might help prevent space madness. And as we can see, transparasteel is not so weak even on a TIE fighter. So naturally, the quality of that will scale up as well. And especially when you think of the joke of TIE fighters being weak in the context of starfighters, a capital ship's going to be a bit better. Maybe I'll have to do a video on TIE fighters. You guys let me know if you'd be interested in that. Just to give you a taste of that, let's talk about another factor regarding the Carrack. Its fighter complement. Because yes, it can carry starfighters, not as many as other ships, but the Carrack is often described as one of the largest light cruisers not equipped with internal hangar bays. Which, if you think about that, implies that in the lore, there are other ships in the Imperial fleet that are light cruisers that are capable of carrying much more fighters than we see here with the Carrack. So even though we have no idea what this ship consists of, or these ships, might be more than one, the Carrack here is an outlier in that it does not have an internal hangar bay, despite its size, so there are ships this size that do have hangar bays that we do not know about. There are lots of little quotes like this throughout the EU, especially in source books like this one, where you'll see just ships implied, or you'll get entire vessel statistics without a single visual to go with them. What this shows is that the Carrack is just a sliver of what the Imperial Navy has to show for it. In fact, that goes true for a lot of Star Wars. It's fun to think about just how much more about Star Wars that is just out there that we have nothing for, like all of these other ship classes that all we have are implied references like this one here from the Imperial sourcebook, and we will just never see them. But they're there. Multiple light cruiser classes with internal hangar bays to carry starfighters. Another fun detail that's overlooked by most people is this. Instead, each Carrack carries 4 TIE Recon starfighters docked on an external rack. These small ships are used for courier missions and scouting duty. When most people use the Empire in stories, they just give them their typical TIE fighters, the good old TIE LN space superiority fighter. But for the Carrack, that's not what it typically carries here according to this line. This is one of the forgotten things about TIE fighters that really irks me. Everyone knows about the TIE variants from the films. The Interceptor, the Bomber, the TIE Advanced. Even ones from the EU like the TIE Defender or the TIE Phantom. But there's others, just so much more simple, that are the real backbone of the Empire. If you've seen my fanfic videos, I touch on this in detail in the second one, but in short you have the TIE Recon, fire control, and ground targeting. The fire control aids in giving targeting data to capital ships and starfighters. The ground targeting is the precursor to the TIE Bomber, and the Recon TIE is the basic scout ship of the Starfighter Corps. The Imperial sourcebook here says 4 starfighter racks are on a Carrack, but later sources up that up to 5. And the Tales comic, oddly enough, depicts a Carrack capable of carrying at least 13 fighters over a full squadron. Which, given its size, isn't impossible here, save for the fact the scaling is off. Now, if we expanded this whole rack system, assuming just this in the middle here is what's actually supposed to carry the TIE fighters, as opposed to what it says in this image here, including the front section here, which I assume is a recovery crane, let's assume a classic 4-fighter flight, and you expand that with 2 more racks, say here and here. That gets you a full squadron. Now looking at it, you can clearly tell that it could really support a full squadron of fighters. But if it can, why doesn't it? This is true of a lot of Imperial ships, where you'll see that they can be capable of carrying a lot more fighters, but don't. Now the reason why it doesn't is a factor I found while having a bit of an autistic deep dive into the Victory-class Star Destroyer a few months back, to which I found this gem.
Wait, this is interesting.
From Star Wars Adventure Journal 10, Alliance Intelligence Report TIE Fighters by Timothy O'Brien. It's all military politicking. Now, according to Adventure Journal 10, the Imperial Navy, due to its rapid expansion program, had a huge debate regarding TIE fighter allocation. This is because most TIE fighters were ending up aboard Imperial Star Destroyers and in their battle squadrons. Due to the objection of other squadron commanders wanting some of these new fighters themselves, new naval doctrine had to be made. This led to the creation of 2 types of starfighter wings, the short and the full wing. Not something you've probably heard about, is it? Crazy how this entire fundamental factor of TIE doctrine isn't even on the wiki, huh? This is why it's a good thing to check your source material. You'll never know what you find.
You fellows keep your eyes skinned. Right.
So stick around and you'll learn plenty more. You know, like and sub and all that fun stuff.
Open fire, sir.
Maximum range.
Not for long, sir.
A starfighter wing is a formation assigned to a line. Anything qualifying as an attack line carries at least a short wing. A heavy attack line or greater carries a full wing. Greater in this case being an Imperial Star Destroyer, Torpedo Sphere, Battle Cruiser, or Super Star Destroyer. Now, this makes no stipulations for any of the other formations in the Navy order of battle. such as the Pursuit Line, Recon Line, Skirmish Line, Troop or Torpedo Line. Since these groups are not really designed around the capabilities of operating a fighter wing, I figure they're largely omitted from this requirement. Now, this source states that this was a problem that both the Republic and the early Empire faced. So with this change, the Navy gave priority to the Attack Line, Heavy Attack Line, and Star Destroyers. These formations make up the muscle of the Empire's fighting squadrons, such as the Light, Heavy, and Battle Squadrons, which carry the majority of starfighters. Other formations seem to make do with whatever can be allocated to them. This is down to these squadrons being the primary fighting force of the Navy. So they're going to receive more priority than, say, a torpedo line or a troop line and having fighter cover. But the thing with this policy is that it shows that a wing is all that a line is going to be getting. Not an individual ship, unless you're a Star Destroyer, but what this shows here is that a line is limited to a single wing. Depending on the makeup of a line, if it's one ship or 20 ships, that's going to spread your starfighter wing pretty thin. And a line can be made up of anything from 1 Star Destroyer to 20 corvettes, and they're all expected to share these fighters. So, as we can see here, starfighter wings are apparently divided between lines of ships, and each of the 3 main lines are expected to be able to run at least one of the following. A short wing divided between an attack line, a full wing divided between a heavy attack line, and a full wing given to a Star Destroyer. Now, as we can see here, a squadron is divided between the line. A squadron is the limit, and all of their capital ships have to share this squadron, and the flagship is playing home to the wing commander. Now, what's the makeup of a short and a full wing? A full wing is what you typically think of, 72 starfighters like on a Star Destroyer, as you see in this graphic here with all the accompanying specialist units. I'll go into all the variants on a full wing another time, so sufficing to say, this here is what you'd have for a full wing. So for a short wing, you get 2 squadrons of LNs plus 1 specialist squadron to make a short wing. But a key thing to note is what it says here. Other squadron types are added and subtracted as resources allow. So what generally constitutes a short wing is 3 squadrons of 12 for a total of 36 fighters each. But even under the Old Republic, 2 squadrons was considered a wing, as we can see by this line here. But this was likely due to probably the nature of combat losses or the fleet makeups of the time. Because you gotta remember, the Republic fleet is nowhere near as big as the Empire is, especially at its height. The Empire has had more time to make its fleet more uniform, and has reinforcements more readily available than the Republic ever did. But still, there are going to be some short wings in some lines, or just a single squadron to a line depending on its makeup. So let's break this down. Say you have an attack line made up of 6 Carracks each, carrying 4 fighters. What does that give us to work with? 6 times 4 gives us 24 fighters, so at least 2 12-fighter squadrons. Not a full short wing. Even if we were generous and bumped it up to a 5-rack, that gives us 30 fighters. 6 shy of a short wing at a full 3 squadrons totaling 36. So remember, an attack line is one partially described as carrying a short wing. So we've got some leeway here, and also with this line on the Republic, carrying at least 2 squadrons, making at least a wing of sorts. So we have these short wings that can be applied in this case. Ship-wise, they are still light cruisers. They still carry enough punch to carry out the stated objective of an attack line. But if it can't carry a full wing, does that make it not an attack line? Well, no. Remember, an attack line is one partially described as being capable of carrying a short wing. And in a way, these 2 squadrons still constitute a short wing, even if it isn't the typical definition of 3 squadrons. Now, this doesn't constitute a full short wing, but Carracks and the attack line aren't meant to be fighter carriers, but screening ships. Their ties would likely stay on station to run zone defense against incoming enemy squadrons. But on their own or in pairs, these ships will still cause plenty of trouble for someone even if they don't carry a full squadron on their own, or a full wing. And this is just in one area of the order of battle here. Like it said, despite being one of the bigger light cruisers in the Imperial fleet, it just doesn't have the hangar space for a full squadron of ties. Which means there are light cruisers that can fill this role with much more fighters. We just don't know what they are. We'll just never get to see them though. Unless someone turns one of these many unnamed Imperial ships into one of them.
Mr. Lewin, sir. Can you see those upper works? looks like a pocket battleship.
Oh, don't be so ruddy ridiculous, Swanson. That's the third pocket battleship you've seen since Sunday.
While we're on the subject of TIE still, TIE squadrons aren't just the LN. The TIE fighter isn't just one ship. It's a system. A coordinated unit operating from pilot in the cockpit, to the flight controllers on their motherships, to the supporting models to help expand their range and capabilities. So let's talk about that, by showing that even if you don't have a full short or full wing, these 6 Carracks and their 2 squadrons of fighters are still deadly. So let's talk squadrons. A naval squadron is the bread and butter of the Starfighter Corps. It's made up of 2 flights of 4 TIE LNs each, and 1 flight of TIE FCs. A Recon squadron, which is more commonly attached to Carracks according to the Imperial Sourcebook, has 2 flights of TIE RCs and 1 flight of TIE FCs. These fighters launch and operate alongside one another, typically a TIE FC paired with each flight of the squadron. In this way you can see how it's such a fundamental part of TIE doctrine, and shows that the TIE fighter is a much more cooperative system than even what the Rebels use. It's a shame it's never really portrayed that way in most EU material. Just think how many fire control ties and recon ties are out there in a battle that we don't get to see. It's this specialization and interconnectiveness that really gives the TIE an edge that we don't see in the films, or anywhere else really. All this just really adds to the versatility of the TIE fighter, and it's something that's just not thought about at all by most authors. That just adds a lot of detail to the ship. So, back to the doctrine. Let's say we have an attack line of Carracks. The 6 ships would have between them 24 starfighters that make up 2 squadrons. For the sake of experimentation, there's a lot we can do with choosing between 2 types of squadrons. The standard Carracks, as we know, would probably be carrying recon squadrons, but following on the similar principles of the short wing, something closer to, say, a naval squadron and a recon squadron paired together would make the most sense for a small task force. With both groups together, you have LNs, FCs, RCs. With 4 ships per Carrack, you'd have to divide them up so each ship gets an element of the 2 squadrons. It's a bit rough. If the line is massed for battle, this isn't a problem on the whole, as both squadrons are together. But if the unit is dispersed on patrol duties or spread across a star system or even a planet in a siege orbit, it makes coordination difficult. TIEs rely on greater numbers to succeed, so the Carracks operating in pairs gives our VAC-heads better chances, as 8 fighters working together rather than 4 operating alone. So, we have a naval squadron of 8 TIE LNs, 4 TIE FCs, and a recon squadron of 8 TIE RCs and 4 FCs, for a total of 24 fighters each between the 6 Carracks. Each ship should get a TIE RC and a TIE FC. This ensures good reconnaissance ability and fire control to assist both fighters and capital ships. Now, you can also have 1 LN each. Then to finish off, 2 ships get 1 type of fighter each. This is the most even dispersal you can do for the 2 squadrons. Though in this way, with how they're mixed, they're not part of the same squadrons. You essentially have bits of one, bits of another, while they're still technically part of the same short wing, short wing in this case. It's not ideal to have to mix your squadrons up or your flight groups up in this way. Now, you can also concentrate them, having 1 flight per ship. This would leave all of your TIE FCs and so on board 1 Carrack, with none of them getting the full support that they could. Or you can just leave them concentrated and have each flight put to a Carrack each. The problem with that is that it leaves all of your TIE FCs and RCs or so on board just 1 Carrack, other ships not getting full support. But if the line was divided in half, you could have 3 Carracks, each operating their intended squadrons, fully organized in their flights. Or you could divide your fighters between the 3 Carracks, organizing each so that they're all ready in their prepared role. The end result is you'd have 2 Carracks with 2 of each type, just ended up together. But that way, when you have the line fully assembled, all of these units are already divided in between their different units and within their different squadrons. But individually, they might not have the full range of capabilities of, say, having an FC and an RC together. But divided this way, the Carracks will still be able to provide sensory data during battle, even if they are lacking the additional boost of having 2 of each fighter type. This could very likely be a very common formation for Carracks, considering the role an attack line has to play acting as a screening vessel for a larger naval squadron. I hope this thought exercise shows just why TIE fighters enjoy so much success when they're allowed to operate in mass, with all these different support TIEs paired together. Now, if we examine the scale of the Navy order of battle, we can see just where these different TIE complements can really shine. For example, the Recon squadron of TIEs would be assigned to something like a Recon line or a Pursuit line, where their ability to scout star systems with their upgraded sensor arrays comes in handy. And in both naval and recon squadrons of TIEs, you'll have fire control TIEs to help your capital ship mark targets. Also, Carracks are incredibly fast ships, described as some of the fastest ships in the Imperial fleet. Fast enough even to keep up with Rebel X-Wings. Just imagine how fast the modified ones in the Recon line are, and how deadly they can be not only to lone threats they encounter, but how quickly they could escape and relay word back to headquarters or their squadron command. Now, after all that talk about variations in a basic fighter complement, let's get back to talking about the Carrack itself. Specifically, its various models. While there is no Carrack 2 overhaul like the Victory or Imperial class received, the Carrack-Class has different versions that we can see throughout the lore. We've got your classic Carrack here that you can see on screen that you've hopefully come to know and love. 10 heavy turbo lasers, 20 laser cannons, and 5 tractor beam projectors. It's a solid ship with heavy guns and enough stopping power to deal with any civilian ship, starfighter, light raider, or freighter it comes across. And in numbers it can make for a deadly threat when organized into a line of battle. According to Fact File 106, this model is known as the Carrack A. The same source also reiterates what the Essential Guide to Vehicles and Vessels says here. This variant replaces the 20 ion cannons with 20 laser cannons, and the fact file states that the 20 ion cannon variant we see here is actually the base model. Still packing the firepower of its heavy turbo lasers, the addition of ion cannons gives the Carrack additional stopping power that makes it very effective against capital ships, while sacrificing its anti-starfighter capability. Both of these models no doubt saw great use under the Empire and under the Warlords. Fact File 106 also makes mention of several hull variants that apparently exist. More specifically, its various engine loadouts that we'll see, seeing as how the graphics here depict a completely different engine loadout than the one on the same page. Going back through the sources, I found several different variations. I'm going to show you them here. We have the Carrack Vigilant from Tales 2, as discussed previously. You'll note here how it has a 3x4 engine layout, which contrasts quite severely to this depiction of the Carrack from the Heir to the Empire sourcebook, which simply has 5 engine banks here. We also have this 4x4 engine bank layout from the Star Wars trading card game and Fact File 78. The 2x3 engine bank from Fact File 106 we talked about before. We have this depiction of the Carrack from the new Essential Chronology. As you can see, it at least has a row of 3 engine banks for the first front. If that continues all the way down, assumedly, that could be a 3x3 engine layout. And then we have 2 alternate depictions here from TIE Fighter and X-Wing Alliance. In TIE Fighter, it has a 2x4 engine strip kind of layout, whereas in X-Wing Alliance it's a 4x1. Seems the artist kinda blended things together with the high-definition model. All of these ships have various quirks to them. An interesting one to note from the TIE Fighter and X-Wing Alliance depiction is an entirely different viewport layout, with a narrow slit versus the large deck-spanning viewport. Assuming the bridge interior is the same as that seen in Tales 2, it seems they've covered up all of the other decks and just allowed the bridge area to be the one that's able to see out. Judging by the look of this ship in comparison to other Carracks, I figure this would be another mass-produced variant. Given the nature of its appearance in the timeline post-Hoth, I figure this is a new variant meant specifically to combat the Rebels. It's got a completely up-armored bridge, it seems a lot thicker as well, and perhaps it's even got new, more powerful engines, given both its depiction in TIE Fighter and X-Wing Alliance. Though with these in Rebel service, it could be assumed that these were stolen from Drydock or defected to the Rebellion. Now with all these visual differences, you can sort of take 2 approaches. One is that the artists are dumb and they should have stuck to the original source and can't do their job. Or 2 is to look at these hull variants and try and draw conclusions about them. For example, there are times Star Destroyers in the old lore are described as being unique in different ways to where you could even tell them apart individually. This is true of ships in real life, such as the Iowa-class battleships. Any good ship nerd will tell you the difference between Iowa and New Jersey just by its silhouette alone. even more so with the minor differences in armament or the places of different parts of the superstructure. The likely explanation to me here is exactly what the fact file says in this line. There are different hull variations. Now, why might that be? Well, for one, the Republic and later the Empire has to produce all of these ships, and one shipyard can't cover everything. So by contracting various shipyards to build these ships, and then using materials to whatever grades are available to produce the ship class to meet the required specifications, you're going to have all these different shipyards making the same ship on different templates, but still trying to meet the same requirements. The most noticeable differences we've seen just looking at these images have been the engines. Another thing to think on is that no one factory as well can produce all of the individual components for a ship. And you have to remember, the Carrack is going to be a very widely produced ship in comparison to, say, an Imperial Star Destroyer or a Super Star Destroyer. While Imperial Star Destroyers might number in the hundreds of thousands, you're going to have billions of Carracks running around the galaxy by comparison. All of these individual ships have to be built somewhere, even during the Republic period and into the Empire. So you're going to have various companies that have to be contracted out to build these individual ships, likely local to various regions as well. And they're only going to have a certain amount of resources available to them. They'll try their best to either make the engines to the original specifications, as laid out in their contracts, probably even have the engine layout licensed to them or to other factories to produce them for the ships in the shipyards. Or they might bring up alternatives that they can build to meet the requirements, such as numerous smaller engines to meet the same speed requirements, or newer, more powerful engines to reduce on cost, save on resources, and still produce an effective model. So from all of this, either there are a ton of different Carrack variants built by these different shipyards across the galaxy with their own little differences, and from that we might even extrapolate that out to other ships in the Imperial fleet, or we can just blame the arts for doing a bad job. Speaking of art, let's take a look at this. This is a Carrack, the real-life inspiration. The dictionary definition of a Carrack is derived from a classical ship which saw use to the 14th to the 15th century as an evolution of the caravel. Some famous ships of this type were the Santa Maria, flagship of Columbus's expedition, Victoria, the first ship to circumnavigate the globe under Magellan, the Mary Rose of King Henry VIII, and the Great Michael of King James IV of Scotland. These ships were ocean-going and both great trade ships and warships of their time. For Star Wars, you can clearly see how the namesake fits so well. It's a small but powerful capital ship operating on the similar principles of the same classical ship in terms of its armament. Its gun layout is something more akin to what you might see on a ship with cannons in the Age of Sail. We discussed its weapon armament previously, and we'll stick to the classic West End Games armament of the Carrack A for this discussion here. Its 10 heavy turbo lasers are mounted like so: 2 forward, 3 port, 3 starboard, and 2 aft. Its 20 laser cannons are mounted 5 forward, 5 port, and 5 aft. This is what the Imperial Sourcebook lays out. Always check your sources. Now let's take a look at this from a top-down view. If a Carrack has to engage its foe, it has to engage in a full 3-dimensional space, so I'll demonstrate it like so. With its armament, a Carrack is best suited to engage in broadside, as that's where the most of its guns can be brought to bear. 3 heavy turbo lasers and 5 laser cannon batteries. Now depending on the nature of the mounting of its forward and rear guns, one of each might be able to turn and assist in a broadside as well, bringing that firepower up a few notches. But if it's all forward mounted, then this is all a Carrack has to bring to bear on any angle. This is a bit of an issue, as the ship's keel has no such defensive armament, and this is where its tie racks are located. Another issue is that whole weakness in the armor plating with the reactor along the midline. Since the Carrack's best place to bring its weapons to bear is in broadside in a fleet action, it has to present that entire side to the enemy, which is a pretty big danger and oversight, since this is the best engagement angle for the Carrack. You'd think with presenting its entire profile to the enemy that its sides would be heavily armored, so that the ship can survive a broadside without taking on so much risk. Like I said, it's pretty video gamey weakness. I mean, even if the shields are still up, this still presents a risk that most captains probably wouldn't take.
My God. Poor devils.
A broadside is the best way for the Carrack to bring all its weapons to bear, so a captain would have to do this knowing the risk any time it has to engage an enemy.
In range of our broadside in 1 minute, sir.
Says she has twice our guns, 4 times our firepower. We must clear for action.
Like I said, I don't care too much for this weakness that Truth at Bakura introduced here, and it's not one mentioned outside of just the source books here. Now, back to its weapons. Its bow and stern guns give it a combined punch of 2 heavy turbos and 5 laser cannon batteries, which if you imagine the ship chasing down or retreating from enemy starfighters is pretty handy.
She's still running under colour, sir.
Well, it's not my intention to chase him across the 7 seas. He's asked for it, Mr. Eccleston. Let him have it.
Starboard bow chaser! Fire! Fire!
This also reflects again that Age of Sail history I touched upon. The historical Carrack was developed before the galleon, and during this period saw the advent of cannons on ships. Besides just having guns on the side of your ship, you'd also have them mounted in the front or the rear.
First part of the stern chest, if you please, Mr. Weller. Aye, sir.
Because when you're making sail, you're going roughly in a straight line, so a ship would have what are called chase guns. If you're being chased and you don't want to give up your speed, you'd have your stern chasers to fire back at the guy chasing you. And the one chasing you will have guns in the front to try and shoot you down, take out your masts, or try and sink you.
More like it.
And due to the nature of shipbuilding at that time, the best place to actually mount your cannons was in the bow or the stern, because they were the most stable parts of the ship. While in the Carrack's case, it's not limited by the constraints of wooden ship design. It's neat to see some of the history reflected in its namesake here, perhaps unintentionally, in the ship's weapon layout.
Magazines, manned and ready.
Sky 1 mount 33, manned and ready.
Sky 1 mount 32 reporting, manned and ready, sir.
1241, manned and ready.
Sky 1 mount 31, manned and ready. All guns, manned and ready.
Along with this standard loadout, we have several variations to talk about. Of course, there's a swapping out of laser cannons for ion cannons, as discussed previously, but there are also other weapon changes. One brief one to note from the TIE Fighter and X-Wing games, about these Carracks we talked about before, is the mention of 2 warhead launchers. Depending whether or not this is a Rebel or Imperial modification, that means the ship can be outfitted with using either concussion missiles or maybe even proton torpedoes, which in a capital ship engagement can come in very handy. Also, it has much more visible cannon mounts, which seem to be turret mounted, including one under the bow. But these 5 visible turrets aren't enough for the full complement of heavy turbo lasers, ion, or laser cannons. And for the sake of talking about the Carrack, I much prefer to talk about the West End Games one, since that's pretty much the true Carrack in the lore. Sorry, gamers.
Starboard 20.
Guns?
Sir.
I shall always steer towards last fall of shot.
So be prepared to correct accordingly. Yes, sir.
Something else of note, going back to Fact File 106. We get not only a minor weapon change, but also some more history. Here it mentions the issue of the light armor around the reactor being a problem for the earlier Carrack models, one later solved by the addition of heavier armor and a turbo laser turret. It also says that the Carrack can either mount its weapons in forward-facing ports or directional turrets. This also gives an alternative weapon placement loadout, 2 forward, 2 aft, and 1 on the ventral hull. Now with this layout, given the number added up equals its heavy turbo lasers, and as turrets might even allow for bringing more guns to bear on each side for a broadside. It also makes mention of its hull being stronger in the front and the center. So whoever wrote this up was clearly influenced to help refine the issue that comes up from the Truce at Bakura novel there. It also adds a layer of history to the development of the Carrack throughout the Imperial period. So perhaps for Han, this trick he wanted to use with the Carrack might not have even worked at Bakura, if this was something he was used to doing to the older Carracks of, say, the Corporate Sector Authority, which makes use of a lot of old retired Imperial ships. Even with its 10-year age, unless the Dominant was one of these older patterns of Carrack, this trick might not have worked if it was up-armored. Just something to think about. Would have been pretty embarrassing for Han to have done that trick successfully, just to have it come out of the smoke and just be like, okay, let's do this.
We're in trouble.
Another minor thing I'd like to bring up. The term battery is one often thrown around in Star Wars lore when talking about ship armaments. In the Wizards of the Coast lore, it ranges from a single gun to up to 6 or 8. Or in the West End Games Star Wars sourcebook, it states that a Star Destroyer turbo laser battery has 3 turrets each, 1 single and 2 double. Wizard of the Coast tries to make it seem like a battery is the existing number divided into groups, but if that were the case, all of these turbo lasers and lasers would be batteries. your port and starboard, fore and aft, etc. It's one of those questions we'll never truly get a correct answer for, but it's fun to think about, because it might mean that the Carrack and other starships might have just a bit more firepower than you typically think of. Another loadout variant is seen during the Warlord era, used by the Carinth Dissension / the Restored Empire, in the story Relic in Adventure Journal 6. In it, the Imperial ships chasing down the heroes include various ships, including 2 Carracks equipped with a new heavy ion cannon weapon. Otherwise, their loadouts include 10 heavy turbo lasers, 16 laser cannons, and 5 tractor beams, and the space for those 4 laser cannons no doubt taken up by this heavy ion cannon. Firepower-wise, that puts these ion cannons on par with even a Star Destroyer. Quite the firepower. In fact, their firepower is such that one might mistake it for an Imperial Star Destroyer. Spoilers for The Last Command ahead if you haven't read it.
Captain, sir, I think the shear is on our port beam.
Very good. Sound off action stations, sound the alarm.
Bugler! Sound off action, followed by the double.
During the latter phases of the Thrawn campaign, the Grand Admiral made use of his newly acquired cloaking shield technology in many innovative ways. One such method was to seemingly bypass planetary shields, when in reality a cloaked ship had slipped under, while the shield wasn't active. Then, with the help of the Dark Jedi Sabaoth coordinating their fire, it appeared as though the shields were being bypassed and shot through by the Star Destroyer. Something fun to note is that you can actually do this in the Star Wars universe. Torpedo spheres technically do this, but it's a very costly and slow process. With this display of firepower, Thrawn forced Yukio to surrender and captured the planet with its defenses intact. Just 4 cloaked Carrack cruisers and a well-timed barrage was enough to convince them that a Star Destroyer was burning through their shields. This helps when your cloaked ship is packing heavy turbo lasers. In fact, if you look at the West End game stats, this level of firepower is reflected in the game mechanics. An Imperial II class Star Destroyer's heavy turbo lasers gives off a damage of 7D in heavy turbo lasers. The Carrack's guns are likewise listed as 7D, since they are also heavy turbo lasers. I guess Zahn might have taken that into account. Hopefully anyway, otherwise that's a pretty big coincidence. When the Chimera is firing on Yukio, there isn't a clear power output discrepancy. If that were the case, the rebels might have caught on the fact that the super weapon was a lie pretty easily. No. You'll note Admiral Dryson here is able to call it out by the gap of the cloaked Carracks themselves. No mention of power output or blast yield discrepancies, only stuff like energy wavelength and spectral makeup of the beams in question, which means the vessels might have been using slightly different laser gas mixtures for them to notice that. Regardless, that shows just how much punch a Carrack carries. Another standout example of Carrack's versatility is in the Lando books, specifically Star Cave of Thon Boca. A fleet of centrality ships under command of Roker Gepta included Carrack cruisers as seen here. No doubt of the older variety, but still had been modified to carry out the extermination of the Oswaft. Now, with some of that technical detail out of the way, let's talk some history. In the complete lore of the EU, the Carrack enters the galactic stage roughly around the same time as the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser. If we take this line from Starships of the Galaxy talking about it being a cheaper alternative to other warships, I'd say it's a bit later, as we can take this meaning it's a more cheaper alternative to the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser, which it's clearly taken some inspiration from. The Carrack here acts as a fast attack ship as well as convoy escort, and we know the Carrack was in service near the beginning of the Clone Wars, as seen in the book Jedi Trial, set during 22 BBY with the Battle of Praesitlin. According to the Alliance Intel report, the Carrack would have seen use of the TIE starfighter with the addition of external racks during the late Republic, early Imperial period. So it's very likely that RSS Integrity under the command of Lieutenant Commander Nita might have had a flight of first gen ties aboard his own ship. Most likely a squadron dispersed as part of Home Strike Group 5 and its group of 3 Carracks, Integrity, Indomitable, and Perseverance, along with the dreadnought Mas Ramdar. Nita's stand here aboard Integrity helped delay the escape of Invisible Hand from Coruscant and allowed for the rescue of Palpatine. I wouldn't be surprised if he got a medal for that. Integrity here is definitely the standout named Carrack of the era. With the rise of the Empire, the Carrack continues into Imperial service. The TIE racks continue use and can be upgraded with the capabilities of carrying up to 5 fighters. We also probably have the Carrack and the Dreadnought to thank for these external racks eventually being used on other Imperial ships, such as the Guardian Light Cruiser, which can carry 6 fighters, and even small ships like the Imperial Patrol Ship, a modified Action 4 bulk freighter. These ships carried pairs of older TIEs, no doubt to allow for more capable ships to carry the new TIE LN, and let these older fighters continue service in minor roles as the Imperial fleet expands. Likewise, the Carrack sees use among other military powers, such as the Centrality Navy, and more neutral powers such as the Tapani Free Worlds Navy. Carracks can be found from the core all the way to the Outer Rim, from small patrols to squadrons such as the one under Admiral Greelanks during the Battle of Nar Shaddaa. The Carrack Vigilant typifies the Carracks of this period. Old but powerful ships, relegated to patrolling and pacifying the new empire. Its crews are still capable, intelligent, and dutiful in their efforts to maintain peace and order in the new galaxy. It would be one of many common ships throughout the empire, patrolling the space lanes, escorting large fleets, taking down smugglers, and crushing small pirate nests. With the outbreak of the rebellion, the Carrack would have been a typical foe for rebels, pirates, smugglers, and any other foe an Imperial sector group has to put up with. While these ships are also a great threat, they're also a great prize, as they are small but powerful warships. You can imagine what a rebel or pirate commander might do with a Carrack and a squadron of hyperspace-capable starfighters. We know that several ended up in Alliance hands, no doubt through defections or by capture. In the TIE Fighter game, we encounter some of these captured Alliance Carracks and fight against them in the role of Fighter Ace Merrick Steele. Just think, the Carrack lived through the entire generational history of the TIE Fighter. From the TIE, to the TIE Avenger and the TIE Defender, and even the ship made to defeat the Defender, Thrawn's missile boat. Going back to this line from Fact File 106, while the rebels captured several, especially post-Hoth, they lost most of them in the Empire's civil war with Grand Admiral Zarin. This no doubt as a result of the concerted effort the Empire was making to put down the rogue Grand Admiral. Any rogue Imperial ship during this time would have been a great threat, and these Carracks were likely caught in the crossfire of mass Imperial defections. Compared to most other Imperial ships, the Carrack would also be ideal for the escape of any Imperial defectors. Small, but powerful and fast, it would make for a great getaway ship, and if signing on with the Alliance, fits very well with their hit-and-run tactics. Though by the time of the Warlords, the Carracks are appearing to show their age, though it must be kept in mind they've been in service for several decades at this point. The most notable Carrack of the post-Endor period is the Dominant, the flagship of the Imperial presence at Bakura. According to the Truce at Bakura sourcebook, it was at least a decade old. Its long service led it to help pacify Bakura and was posted as the new flagship of local Imperial forces. Among its list of maintenance issues, including the lack of active tractor beams and a bad set of lateral thrusters. Despite this, its main armaments, turbo lasers and laser cannons, were still fully operational, and it was listed as carrying Recon ties to help augment the fleet's recon ability. Despite being the largest ship at Bakura, it still managed to hold the line against more advanced alien forces, and even gives the rebels a serious threat to contend with after the Cyrufi fleet has been dealt with. Now, a proper Warlord Carrack that has a brief but standout role is the Ambition. Not a line ship, but it serves as the personal escape craft of Moff Sarn in the opening of the Darkstryder campaign. Harkening back to this line in the Imperial sourcebook about Carrack serving as personal transports for governors and Moffs. A brief but standout loyalist Imperial Carrack can be seen here serving the Empire in the X-Wing books. Here the Carrack Cruiser Expeditious is acting as a courier ship, transporting Imperial intelligence agent Curtin Lure in the first X-Wing book, Rogue Squadron, while on assignment. Later in the book, Expeditious and a Lancer-class frigate Ravager engage in a battle against Rogue Squadron. This is during their push towards the core during an attack on the world of Vladet. This tag team of Carrack and Lancer, anti-capital ship and anti-starfighter, was a deadly combination against the rebel starfighter squadrons and the Roan-level corvette. In this battle, there's something interesting of note. As Lure's shuttle arrives in the system to rendezvous with the Expeditious mid-battle, the shuttle actually docks with the Carrack. Now, the Carrack, as discussed, doesn't have any hangar bays, and the most notable docking area on the ship are the docking racks used for the TIEs, but it doesn't dock there. What the Lambda does is land atop of the Expeditious. Note that it says the dorsal hull, and it's a docking tunnel from the Expeditious that connects with the shuttle, meaning that this is a docking point for the ship itself. There are actually a few other docking ports we can find in other sources. Going back to the Imperial era, the Vigilant from Tales 2 here has a large docking arm that comes out of the bottom and is capable of docking with a Corellian corvette, which for fun here you'll see scaled side by side. This docking arm is much more sturdy looking, than the simple docking tube that has no doubt enclosed a Lambda's exit ramp in this passage. It's probably good for anything that can't easily sidle up to the side of the ship. It cannot dock above due to the placement of its sensor dish. It's long enough to extend past the Carrack's tie racks, and by the looks is ahead of this small tower. Speaking of, this comic and the guide to vehicles and vessels states that these are tie racks, but I don't buy this explanation or this depiction. I would say it's more apt to call it part of its tie system. Notice its placement at the back here. To me, this is a flight control tower. If you look at its placement and imagine this is a normal hangar bay, this is in the exact same spot a hangar control room might be on an Imperial Star Destroyer. So I'm content with calling it a flight control tower, which would fit nicely into the lore and harkens back somewhat to the Venator's flight control tower. Going back to the comic, you can see that the docking arm is placed in front of this tower, in the spot where the laser cannon should be located on the front crane arm. Also, something to note on this tower from the central guide is this right here. Now, to me, this looks like a hinge. I'd say this tower might be able to fold up to provide more room for the ship to connect with other vessels. It could also do this when entering dry dock or landing on a planet's surface, since its protruding would kinda get in the way of an even landing. But for when this docking arm isn't needed or practical, we also have this shot here from Crimson Empire 2, indicating that the Carrack has docking amidships. Logically, this assumes on both port and starboard sides, since as the Death Trooper novel puts it, Imperials make everything symmetrical. This also shows that the Marauder has a docking hatch on the bow in the rear of its hangar bay. Also, that size isn't quite right. Let me fix that. Much better. So to recap, there's a docking hatch on the top of the ship, 2 docking hatches on the port and starboard side, and a docking arm that can extend from the ventral hull. Funny how with all this, the Carrack still doesn't get an internal hangar. But the Lancer-class frigate apparently has a small hangar for 2 shuttles according to Vehicles and Vessels. They managed to refit the Dreadnought with a hangar bay. I guess the Republic and the Empire didn't want to spend the credits. Ah well. At least we know the Carrack has enough docking ports for shuttles, and can land for shore leave. Pretty interesting stuff. Apart from those docking ports, there's also this here from Star Wars Mission 17. Here we have Darth Vader after the Battle of Yavin returning to Coruscant on what I assume is a commandeered Carrack Cruiser, which has helped to recover his TIE Advanced. Not only does this book show examples of a Carrack with an external rack capable of carrying 5 TIE fighters, it also has retractable landing gear, a boarding ramp, and even shows the Imperial Palace has executive landing areas capable of accommodating ships as large as a Carrack Light Cruiser. There's also a Dark Empire reference here. Palpatine in this book is mentioned here in Vader's monologue to have been using clones to prolong his life, and is doing so prior to the Battle of Yavin. Something this book adds to give you a real head-scratcher is the inclusion of the landing gear on the boarding ramp. Now, we discussed a little bit of this with the Ambition, which is being held in an underground hangar, but we have no idea how it was resting there, thanks to the text being so vague. We do see from the artwork that it has some takeoff thrusters, 2 located port and starboard in the midsection. With that tower, I originally surmised it could fold up to allow the ship to land, but if we take this book into account, that means it has retractable landing gear, which makes sense because all the major capital ships of that era do possess retractable landing gear. The Acclamator, the Venator, and the Dreadnought Heavy Cruiser all possess retractable landing gear. With similar proportions, if the Dreadnought can land with that lower sensor dish in its way, then the Carrack Cruiser must likewise be able to with that lower tower. And if I were a betting man, I'd bet that tower has an exit ramp and a turbo lift, not only to the observation area below, but so that the crew can be quickly ferried out of the ship. Given its prominence, that's what I assume, but given that some of the other Carrack variants we've seen don't include this tower in their artwork, intentional or not, said boarding ramp might be somewhere else. It's anyone's guess at this point. So with his return to Coruscant, Vader reports the loss of the Death Star to his master. Palpatine forbids retaliation against the rebels, lest it lead to worlds rallying behind them as martyrs. Instead, Palpatine has a mission for Vader. Admiral Turmo, who'd been on assignment on orders left by Grand Moff Tarkin, lost his Star Destroyer Liquidator due to the efforts of Luke Skywalker. Left adrift with the final set of orders from Tarkin, he and his comm officer crashed on an alien planet and were able to send out a distress signal. Palpatine has charged Vader with recovering the data, and dealing with the Admiral.
You have failed me for the last time, Admiral.
Vader carries out this mission in the book using this Carrack Light Cruiser. Apart from its passengers, it carries 4 TIE pilots, 2 TIE LNs, 2 TIE bombers, as well as carrying Vader's TIE Advanced in the lead position. However, only Vader would fly his ship into the action in the story, as the ship ends up becoming incapacitated. We have mentioned a few oddities that led a buddy of mine to believe this is actually a smaller variant of Carrack, but I believe if we stretch our imagination a bit, we might be able to justify these concerns. For one, the bridge area seems to be treated as a much smaller space, but if we consider the area that you, the player, as Vader, are in, you're largely focused on the helm. We also have this quote of the crew being buckled in while in the ship's mid-compartment. This seems a bit odd, but if you recall, even the Falcon while taking off from Mos Eisley, Luke and Obi-Wan buckled in as they blasted off into orbit.
Oh my, I'd forgotten how much I hate space travel.
So in like manner here, the special crew Vader has brought along here have all strapped in for takeoff, which might imply this is standard procedure for ships to have their passengers strap in. But as they're leaving, the ship's hyperdrive fails. Given the likely range that his TIE Advanced would have had, he'd have only been able to reach some smaller Imperial posts in the outer rim. Not only that, but if this was the only ship available to the base he commandeered it from, it likely would have been an older ship, further adding stress to its systems.
It's an older code, sir, but it checks out. I was about to clear them.
Interestingly, as Vader, the player makes an effort to repair the hyperspace motivator to get the ship going. This shows Vader/Anakin Skywalker's way with machines even before The Phantom Menace came out. Barely, mind you, as it came out in the same year.
I've accepted the truth that you were once Anakin Skywalker, my father.
That name no longer has any meaning for me.
It is the name of your true self you've only forgotten.
Now, after making repairs and doing some meditation, the Carrack Light Cruiser comes out in the middle of an asteroid field, either evading a large asteroid, getting hit and surviving, or destroying it. The Carrack then emerges having taken a severe pounding, only to encounter a droid ship twice the size of the Carrack, which, if true, would be at least 700 meters long, or bigger than a Dreadnought heavy cruiser at 600 meters long.
There's always a bigger fish.
After it opens fire, Vader decides to take his fighters and split off to try and reach the objective, leaving the co-pilot to take the helm. This ship simply has pilots exit through an airlock and then climb down handholds to get to the fighter's cockpit and enter through the vacuum of space. From here, though, we get our example of what indicates the small size of the crew here.
Lieutenant Chad! Sir! Take 6 men, board that vessel, take her into any English port you can make and report there for orders!
According to this line, Vader indicates that the co-pilot is the only man left aboard the ship, which, if true, means that Vader is misremembering things, because there is also a Royal Guard and Captain Mordak, who must also still be aboard, right? If we look here at the text, you can see it only makes mention of the 4 TIE pilots getting into their ships, not of the captain or the Royal Guardsmen. Now they clearly came with, as they are seen at the end here after Vader has disabled the droid ship's ground controls and released the disabled Carrack. They are present with the TIE pilots after Admiral Termo is rescued, so either the author erred here or he likely considers the pilot to be the only crewman aboard the ship, which may in fact be true.
Today, if you please, Mr. Hornblower, I don't intend to lose any more of this convoy through your dawdling, sir! Aye, aye, sir.
As we've discussed, the carry carries a crew of over 1,000 and operates a skeleton crew of 500. Given the fact that Vader originally took this ship just to get back to Coruscant, it's likely the ship might not have even carried a full crew at whatever base Vader arrived at to get back to the Emperor. If this pilot was the only one at the base, he could have just been pressed by the base commander to get Vader to Coruscant, and that was that. The TIE pilots, fighters, and bombers were not part of the Carrack's original complement, but were from the Palace, which might mean they are even elite pilots as well. With the addition of them plus the repairs to Vader's TIE, this small complement was likely all the Carrack had, which means that the ship is capable of being flown by at least 2 people, if barely. As we see, it's not optimal. Without an engineering crew to take care of things, Vader and the co-pilot seemed to do all the heavy lifting, while Captain Mordak and the rest of the passengers just sat in some compartment somewhere this whole time. But what about Mordak? He's a captain, isn't he? That's true, but given his promotion at the beginning of Missions 18, he's made a general. which means he's an army captain, not a navy man, so he's not in his element to command such a ship. The Royal Guard likewise is out of things to do, since hand-to-hand combat and bodyguard duties don't really equate to running a weapons system or any of the other functions aboard a ship. So it's between Vader and the poor pilot who got a little more than he bargained for when taking the Emperor's right hand back to Coruscant. Still, he weathered it better than poor Admiral Termo does. So with this, we have another Carrack with interesting lore tidbits. We have how the tie racks are used with hydraulic clamps, pilots in their EV suits climbing down through the vacuum of space to get into their fighters, the ship has landing struts, a boarding ramp, and can be even flown by 2 people in a pinch. Ideally, you wouldn't want to do this, as it would best operate with a crew to do everything from man the bridge stations, weapons, engineering, etc. But in a pinch, you can fly one with no more than 2 pilots, provided nothing goes wrong. And seeing how the ship was commandeered to get Vader to Coruscant, its poor pilot having to run the ship with Darth Vader at the helm, I imagine there was a little performance anxiety. But he did manage to get the ship there and back twice for Vader. It's a shame the ship isn't named. Perhaps the ship was in space dock undergoing construction or refit, and had not been christened with a name. Maybe it was due to get sold out to the Corporate Sector Authority or scrapped when Vader arrived. He likely seized it under his own authority so he could get back as soon as he could. So, that's it then. No, actually.
No. There is another.
Rewinding back to Missions 1, there is actually another Carrack variant, and this one is smaller. This is a true Carrack variant, a pint-sized Carrack, which according to Dodonna here, is a mere 150 meters in length. Talk about a short stack. It's capable of carrying 3 TIE fighters, as you can see here mentioned as being half the size of a full Carrack, but still boasts full engines and hyperspace capability. It's still got plenty of cargo space, not only for a few speeder bikes, but also military land speeders, a portable laser cannon, a distress beacon, 3 TIE pilots, and 3 squads of stormtroopers. With more than 20 stormtroopers seen in this story, if its squad consists of 12 troopers, it could be close to a full platoon in strength if we stretch things, given what we don't see from Luke's perspective that might have been fighting to keep Han and Leia at bay. It can also be flown by 1 pilot, as we see in Missions 4. However, starting out crewed with 4 officers, including a gunnery officer lieutenant in Missions 1, this emphasizes, however, for Captain Skeezer to fly this thing requires extreme focus. Missions 3 here also shows that TIE fighter racks aren't just limited to connecting with Imperial fighters, as 3 TIE racks are shown here also being capable of carrying 3 X-Wings that were acquired by the Empire. Though I don't think this Carrack is a mass-produced model. From the context of both Missions 1 and 2, this short Carrack is a one-of-a-kind model. But who knows? If you can build one, you can build more. I think that about covers it for obscure Carrack lore. Now, should we get back to talking about the Warlords? What's this? The Marduk. Oh. This comes from the No Disintegrations adventure Gone to Ground. This is probably one of my best finds I made during my research to compile various things on the Carrack. So, let's talk about Gone to Ground. The story begins with a terrorist attack, a gas bombing of an Imperial prep school, lovingly drawn for everyone to see. System Sub-Commander, Jared Brogetal, whose son was killed in this attack along with 40 other cadets, decide to hunt down the Hodin terrorist responsible. Taking command of the Marduk, he assembles a fleet to hunt down the terrorist who did it himself. You, as the players, are supposed to be bounty hunters and end up tracking down this terrorist, as well as eventually ending up in a firefight at the terrorist stronghold. First thing of interest here is the rank, System Sub-Commander. I like to try and explore where these one-off rank things tend to fit in some of these source books. Now, it's clearly a naval rank or title, as he's able to take command of several ships. Starting from Cylon, he goes to Palaxides, which is several sectors away. Either he's being quite the maverick, or he has quite more pull than a mere ship commander might. If I were to guess, I'd say System Sub-Commander is more a title and position, rather than a true Navy rank. And looking at the Imperial Navy order of battle, we might have a contender for this position. Our good father Brochtal here might be a systems admiral. Command of a fleet at least makes him captain of the line, commanding a line of ships. But the text says fleet. Now, a squadron is considered a fleet by the Old Republic standards, so he might well be a commodore. Now we have to look at the name itself again. System Sub-Commander. So he's a subordinate to presumably a system commander. So while he might not be a systems admiral himself, he himself might be under one. So while he may not be a systems admiral himself, he's a junior one. Assuming a systems admiral is anything from a rear admiral to a full admiral, he himself could be a rear admiral. But the force he brings to bear on Palaxides is pretty small, with only the one Carrack to attack this terrorist nest. How could this be the case? Simple. According to the Navy Order of Battle, a squadron is the largest concentration of ships which is normally assigned to a single system. A direct order from a Moff, Grand Moff, or the Emperor is necessary to gather more ships in a single system. And seeing as how it explicitly mentions here how he isn't as powerful as a Moff to be carrying out such a vendetta. He's operating under the radar and between the lines. If this fleet is squadron-sized and he had to disperse across several systems trying to find the terrorist, and then when he finally locates the base thanks to the players to hunt them down, he comes himself in the fastest ship in the squadron. Something small but powerful that can operate under the radar. A Carrack. So at the very least, he could be a junior commander under a systems admiral. A desk commodore, but with rank to take command of a squadron and put his flag on the Marduk and have a handful of ships scouring nearby space for signs of the terrorist. While none of his fleet engages the main camp in the final act or are noticeable to the players when they enter the system, but I'd guess they're dispersed scanning the planet for other signs of the base, and the Marduk just gets lucky. Depending on the ending of the campaign, Brochital is promoted. To what? It doesn't say.
Baker's signal to Admiralty from Commodore South Atlantic.
I beg your pardon, sir, but that signal is incorrect.
I haven't said anything yet.
You have, sir.
I said make a signal to Admiralty. What's wrong with that?
Then you went on to say from Commodore South Atlantic.
Well, I am Commodore Harwood, aren't I?
No, sir. You are Rear Admiral Sir Henry Harwood, Knight Commander of the Bar. My congratulations, sir.
But if he's already either a Commodore or a Rear Admiral, he'd be promoted to either a Rear Admiral or Vice Admiral, depending on his position, since he presumably took command of all these ships local to the system he was in at the time, or is simply picking out the Marduk to serve as his flagship before ordering the other ships to his command. I'd say he has to be at least a Commodore under a systems admiral, with enough pull to be one of the admiral's immediate subordinates, but with enough authority as a flag officer to take command of a squadron to try and hunt down Hogra Den.
Signal to squadron. All ships form line astern to flagship. We stand it to breast.
Now as to the Marduk itself, we get 3 really good things. The Marduk is just a standard West End Games Carrack. 10 heavy turbo lasers, 20 laser cannon batteries, 5 tractor beams. It's this next bit here that makes it very special. First, its TIE complement. Here we have an example of a mixed TIE complement aboard a single ship. A Recon TIE and 2 supporting TIE LNs. Which if we take it to its logical conclusion, this makeup shows a mixed Naval Squadron and Recon Squadron complement, proving in practice the mixing of squadron and the division of flight elements among various ships. That's pretty cool. The next one is something much more impressive and really opens up the combat ability of the Carrack, because the Marduk is carrying a dropship. Now, it's not named in the source, but thanks to its stats, I was able to find what this ship actually is, because these West End game stats are very specific, and I was able to find it based on its flight stats and its armament. It's actually a ship mentioned a fair bit, the MT-191 dropship from the Imperial Sourcebook. This is pretty incredible. This is mentioned here as just being docked with the external rack, which means these ships can carry more than just TIE fighters in these, but can also carry a very large transport. Here it is scaled with the rest of the ship, and its hold is bigger than the body of a Lambda-class shuttle. And further evidence, if you aren't convinced that this is the 191, we have this line here. Disgorges the Drop Company. A drop company is a formation of the Imperial Army, basically a specialized line company for hostile environment drops. Think of them as like the Empire's ODSTs, and this is the only story a drop company ever appears in. Now, not only do we get to see a drop company in action, we get to see Imperial drop troopers in their special environment gear. Between these two panels, we get to see them fully. But also what appears to be a medical symbol on their shoulders, which either means these troopers are part of the same company, or this is part of the Imperial Army kit as their standard hazardous environment suit.
Ah, I remember my days in the hazardous environment suit.
Which, if so, is cool and shows us another unique armor set of the Imperial Army, but for the infantry, rather than for the armor assault crews. And we also get stats on them that are pretty decent. A typical drop trooper is greater than or equal to a typical Imperial Army trooper stat-wise, somewhat less so compared to a veteran Army trooper, but that's to be expected. But I can imagine a veteran drop trooper being especially deadly if they reach that level. What we get from this is a whole bunch of cool details that are just hidden in one adventure book that's not referenced anywhere else, and that's really cool. Now, where was I? Right, Warlords. Pretty much every Warlord had Carracks at their disposal. Well, everyone except for Isard. And Allah. Both of whom kinda sucked the whole Warlord business. We know, for example, that Admiral Grunger had 100 Carracks in his armada after bullying various systems for support with his Super Star Destroyer. Now, according to Recon and Report, The Journey to Coruscant, several Warlord forces also made use of Carracks in various fleets to raid enemy Warlords, or even the forces of the New Republic and the Empire. Grand Moff Zinj and Grand Admiral Thrawn, two guys who actually held the title of Warlord and weren't just LARPers, actually made good use of Carracks in their fleets. Zinj would often use Carracks to escort his flagship, the Iron Fist, and Thrawn's armada constantly made use of them for offensive operations such as at Sluis Van and Yukio. Even independent factions managed to get their hands on them. The Kessel Defense Fleet under Morath Drool had a handful of Carrack cruisers which fell in the defense of the system against Admiral Dala after she emerged from the Maw. Now, something not directly attributable to the Carrack, but most likely in reference to them, comes from the Imperial Sourcebook. In the Navy Order of Battle, a recon line is listed as containing 2 to 4 ships, operating in pairs or individually. Reconnaissance ships are usually light cruisers, modified for even greater sublight speed, trading in half their laser cannons for a full complement of sensors, with greater range and sensitivity than the Imperial average. Recon lines are to find the enemy, retreat without engaging in combat, and return to report on the disposition of the enemy. So, that would mean there's a reconnaissance Carrack variant, with 10 instead of 20 laser or ion cannon batteries, depending on the base model, which would have an even faster speed than the X-Wing and even better sensor capabilities. That means these Carracks are great for tracking a retreating foe. Recon lines can be found in light squadrons, heavy squadrons, and even in augmented battle squadrons, all of which makes this a useful fast reconnaissance ship. Now imagine what this could do if you paired the Carracks with a recon squadron. You'll have a fantastic scouting force with great sensors, added data collection with the recon starfighters, and the speed to make a hasty retreat to inform and rally the fleet. In fact, let's finish things off by looking at where in the order of battle we can place the Carrack.
Alert all command. Deploy the fleet.
We've touched on the reconnaissance line, which gives us this very specialized Carrack. But what about our base models? First and foremost, we have the attack line, 3 to 6 ships. 6 if the line consists of light cruisers or smaller. So here, we could have a group of 6 Carracks. Now, since the job here is to screen larger capital ships, both laser or ion cannons can work here. You can take one or the other, or mix. With the 6 ships as we talked about, we could easily fly a short wing of fighters. A heavy attack line is much the same, that we could operate with 4 to 8 Carracks in total. This is all assuming a line is a uniform group of the same ship class, which for the thought exercise, let's assume is true. For example, in Twin Stars of Kira, we have the Imperial 2391st Battle Squadron. Here we see the makeup of a typical squadron-sized Imperial fleet. In this formation, we see the mention of 8 light cruisers. Assuming for the sake of hypothesis these are all Carracks, this makeup might be the fleet's pursuit line. Since there is typically no heavy attack line, and the order of battle has attack lines for light cruisers at 6 ships, given the fleet's makeup of 2 other VSDs, an interdictor, an escort carrier, strike cruisers, frigates, and corvettes, the other attack line positions are pretty well full. An augmented battle squadron like this, I'd say these Carracks, if that's what they are, fill one of the pursuit lines, and the corvettes the other. But 10 Carracks with a full tie complement of either 4 to 5 ties each? That could give you near a full wing of 40 to 50 ties, which would make a powerful force on its own. Expand this to a squadron and then fleet level, and it's easy to see where the Carrack really comes out in force as one of the workhorses of the Imperial fleet. Pirates and privateers also goes into some detail on the role smaller capital ships play in the Imperial Navy. As we can see how they would operate in various lines, Carracks are well suited to patrol duties. Built around being powerful reconnaissance ships, it's good for identifying targets and not being a pushover when investigating star systems. If it can retreat and escape to rally the rest of the squadron, it's done its job. Escort missions not so much. Depending on the variant and the numbers in question, this can be mitigated somewhat. But it's more likely to be found on patrol duties rather than convoy escort, but not impossible, especially if it's part of a larger convoy. Traps and suppression operations would likewise see the use of Carracks to help expand the range of the fleet in maintaining a blockade around a target area. For interdiction, it's common for ships like the Carrack to be involved with capturing a vessel that drops out of hyperspace, either by moving it and grabbing it with its tractor beams, assisting in neutralizing with its TIE fighters, or perhaps even going in with ion cannons. Now, with all this detail I've laid out for you, I think I'll end this here with one line from Adventure Journal 2, A World to Conquer. This is where many smaller ships are far more useful than a single Star Destroyer. A single Star Destroyer can't be everywhere at once. 10 Carrack-Class cruisers can. So that's my comprehensive lore video on the Carrack. Hopefully you all learned a thing or two. I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with all the details I dug up here. Most of these other videos here are just long enough to read off the Wikipedia page, and don't go that much further into detail on it. What little more anyone else does say is pretty surface level, or if they do go into detail, it isn't near as deep as I just went.
You must be proud to be alone successful among this crowd of intellectual giants. If you double your attainment while you double your years, I'm afeared you'll leave the rest of us behind.
So I hope I've made the definitive detailed video on the subject, and I hope you all gained a new appreciation for this ship. Editing this all together and putting it out there isn't making me any money right now, so don't expect me to put these out too often. Like the description says, I'm just a lore nerd. If I knew how to run a business, I think I'd be doing that already. In any case, I made sure that every segment here is sourced so you can go and check out all the books I had to read to get this all together yourself. Star Wars used to be good, you know, and had all these fun little details out there for you to find all by yourself and enjoy. That's what we used to have to do back in the day, so I'm glad I could do some of that here for you today to show you how it's done. So now you too know how it feels to find cool and obscure lore. Maybe you'll use it in your role-playing campaigns. Maybe have some more deadly encounters with a Carrack cruiser. Or use it as a hero ship as you serve the Empire in keeping peace in the space lanes or fighting off the rebellion. Who knows? It's how you'll build your own adventure. Until next time, Ross out.